Okay, so good afternoon to all, and welcome to lecture number 22. And this is last lecture of chapter number 3. We'll finish chapter number 3 by today. And in today's session, we'll be talking about how to construct the graph from the skeleton. In last lecture, we have studied how to develop the skeleton by using thinning method or by using middle axis method and so on. Now, once skeleton is constructed, from that we can represent the graph and so on. So in today's lecture, we will study how to construct the graph, okay, from the skeleton, and then at the end also we'll study the region adjacency graph and so on. And so that will basically help us to represent the structural information about the object in the form of shape and so on. So you know that in the last lecture we talked about how to develop the skeleton. So this is the skeleton of this object. For this circular shape, this dot is the only skeleton, and if there are two circles adjacent, then there will be 3 dots, and if this is kind of shape, then this will be the skeleton of the object. So this is also a skeleton of this object, and for a square it will be like this. Skeleton will be like this. So skeleton construction algorithm do not result in the graph, okay, but once you construct the skeleton, from that we can basically construct the graph. So transformation from the skeleton to graph is relatively straightforward, okay. Okay, how it is done, that we are going to study in this lecture. So before that, we'll see okay, what is meant by endpoint, what is meant by normal skeleton point, and what is meant by skeleton node point. Already we talked about these things in our last lecture, but okay, for construction of the graph, this is again needed. So skeleton endpoint means basically, suppose for example, this is the skeleton, and then this point is, okay, the point where only one neighboring left side neighbor is there, right? So otherwise right side neighbor is not there, so it is having only one neighbor. Or suppose for example, this is the pixel under consideration, so it has only one right side neighbor connectivity is there in for connectivity and so on. So this point and this point is called as the skeleton endpoint. So if the skeleton has only one neighboring point, then it is called as the skeleton endpoint. So this is a skeleton endpoint, this is also the skeleton endpoint, and so on. I hope that you have understood what is by skeleton this one skeleton endpoint. Skeleton endpoint has only one neighbor, right? So that point is considered as a skeleton endpoint. While constructing the skeleton, we have seen that we cannot delete or we cannot eliminate the skeleton endpoint because it will reduce the length of that skeleton, so which we cannot do. Now, the next point which is needed for construction of the graph is a normal skeleton point. Okay, so all those points, okay, so for example, this is the skeleton, so this is the end point of skeleton, this is also end point of the skeleton. Between all those end points, okay, all those pixels are considered as a normal skeleton point. Now if you consider any point or any pixel, it has two neighbors. One is to the left side and another one is to the right side. So if the skeleton has at least two neighboring points, then it is called as the normal skeleton point. You cannot also break, or you cannot also remove the normal skeleton point while constructing the skeleton, because it will make the discontinuity in the skeleton. So we cannot do that one. So normal skeleton point is the point, okay, which has at least two neighboring points. Okay, so that is called as the normal skeleton point. Okay, now where this skeleton endpoint is used, or where this normal skeleton point is used, I'll tell you while constructing the graph from the skeleton. Okay, the third point, which is very, very important in the skeleton, is skeleton node point. Okay, node means junction. Now at the junction, basically various skeletons or various branches will be there, or various edges will be there. So you know that at the junction, this junction point is connected at least 3 points. Means suppose for example, if I have the skeleton like this and then vertical line is there. Okay, suppose for example, assume that there is a vertical line here. So this point will be having 3 neighbors now, this one, and this side, right? So if a point has 3 or more, see, suppose for example, if I have the skeleton like this one, there are several lines are there, and then this point is having several more than 3 or more than 2 neighboring points, then that point is called as a skeleton node points. So if a point has 3 or more neighboring points, then that point A is called as the skeleton node points. I hope that you have understood what is by skeleton endpoint, where only one neighboring is there. Normal skeleton point, where at least two neighboring pixels are there, and skeleton endpoint of this one node point means, okay, there will be a junction, okay, and in that junction basically minimum 3 or more than 3 neighboring points will be there. So corresponding point is called a skeleton node point. So we have understood endpoint, the normal point, and the node point. Now, how those points are used for constructing the graph from the skeleton? So let us see here. The algorithm for region graph construction from the skeleton is that first step is that we have to assign a point description to all the skeleton points. Means whether that point is a skeleton endpoint or normal skeleton point or node point. So we have to assign all the points in the skeleton as a either endpoint or node point or normal point. So that is the first step while constructing the region graph from the skeleton. Then second point is that, or second step is that, let the graph node, now which will be the, see, when you are saying that graph consists of nodes and edges. So which points will form the node and which points will form the edges? So all endpoints and node points will form the node in the graph, and all the normal skeleton points will form the edges in the graph, right? See that in the graph consists of what? Graph consists of nodes and edges, right? So which points will form the nodes? So nodes will be formed by node point of the skeleton or end point of the skeleton. So these 2 points will form the node in the graph, whereas the normal skeleton will form the edges in the graph. So what you have to do, step 3, connect any 2 graph nodes by the graph edge if they are connected by a sequence of normal points. So sequence of normal point will form the edge between 2 nodes, and these node points will be either node point or end points, right? So in that way you have to construct the graph. So this is very straightforward method for obtaining the graph from the skeleton. So see that the next point is the region decomposition. Okay, and from that also you can form the graph and so on. Now region decomposition approach is based on the idea that the shape recognition is a hierarchical process. Okay, means basically from the main we will go to the sub and then subregions, and then from that we can construct the graph. So region decomposition approach is based on the idea that shape recognition is a hierarchical process, and where the shape primitives are defined at the lower level, okay, whereas at the higher level, from those primitives graph will be constructed, right? So this is the higher level representation in the region decomposition or in structural representation, whereas in the lower level shape primitives are defined. Now what is by primitives? So primitive is nothing but the simplest element. Okay, so when complicated this one region is there, so basically from that complicated object we can form the simple elements, and those simple elements will represent a primitive, of that region, and then those primitives are used for constructing the graph and so on. And then arc describes the mutual relation between the lower and higher level. So apparently you know that edge consists, this one graph consists of nodes and edges. So these edges are connected between two nodes. Okay, so here in the region decomposition, what we do basically, from the complicated region will form the simple primitives, and then from simple primitives, okay, will form the graph. So it is a hierarchical process. How it is done, let us look at the steps. So steps, the solution to the decomposition problem consists of two main steps. One is, the first step is to segment a region into a simpler subregions or primitives. So a complicated region is given. So from that you have to segment it into a simpler regions. That simpler regions will represent as the primitives of that graph. This one. Complicated region. And the second step is their analysis. We have to do the analysis of that one. So primitives are simple enough to describe successfully using simple scalar shape properties, and the detailed description of how to segment a region into primary convex subregion, methods of decomposition to concave vertices, and then graph construction resulting from the polygonal description of the subregions are given basically in the research paper which was published in 1977 by Pavlidis. Okay, Pavlidis. So let us look at this one. Simple example of decomposition of this one. Suppose, for example, you have this region, right? Triangular region is there, and then what you have done, the general idea of decomposition is shown in this figure. So this is your original figure, and from that we are going to construct the graph. Like, okay, so graph consists of what? The nodes. See, these are the nodes, node points, and then these are the edges or arcs, right? So all those points are normal skeleton points, and either this one is the end point or junction point, and so on, right? So how this is obtained from the region decomposition? See, was first method we have studied how to obtain the graph from the skeleton. That algorithm we have seen. It is a straightforward. That in that what we have done means basically we have identified which are the basically endpoints, which are the normal skeleton point, and which are the node points, and then we have marked all those points, and then nodes will be either node point or endpoints, and then edges will be this one. All the points of normal skeleton points. So from that we have constructed the graph from the skeleton. Now another method for construction of the graph is region decomposition. Means you have given a complicated region, and from that region we have to construct the graph. So for that we have to do, so what is the procedure? It is a hierarchical process. Means basically the complicated region is divided into a simpler region, and these simpler regions are called as the primitives, right? So the general idea of decomposition is shown in the figure, where the original region, one possible decomposition, and the resulting graph are presented here. So this is the original region. So primary convex subregions are labeled as primary subregions. So see that here primary subregions are like, for example, this is one subregion, this is another subregion, and then third subregion, and so on. So from this one, these subregions are formed. Okay, so this is one subregion, this another, and then this. Okay, so there are 6 basically subregions: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. Then so these are the primary regions basically, and then primary subregions are found from that one. And then see that primary convex subregions are labeled as the primary subregions or kernel. So these are considered as a kernel, okay, which are shaded in this figure C, and are subregions which belongs to several primary convex subregions. Okay, so this belongs to several primary convex subregions, and then from that, okay, we have formed the graph. Like for example, this region will represent one node, this region will represent another node, then this region will represent the third node, this region will represent the fourth node, and then this region will represent the fifth node, this region will represent the this one. So this is called as the primitive. This is also called as the primitive, and so on. So these primitives are formed from the original region by decomposing into a small standard shapes and so on. So these standard shapes are called as the primitives, and then these primitives will basically represent as a nodes. So this will also represent one node and so on, and then between the nodes you have to connect the line that is nothing but the edge. So this will result in a graph. Decomposition graph. So this is another way to obtain the graph by using decomposition region decomposition. Okay. Now, what are the information? What kind of information is there with the graph nodes? So if subregions are represented by polygons, graph nodes bear the following information. Like, for example, what kind of information if subregions are represented by polygon? Then first information is that node type represent the primary subregion or kernel. Then number of vertices of subregion represented by the node, right? Then area of the subregion represented by the node, and main axis direction of the subregion represented by the node, and the center of the gravity of subregion represented by the node. So this kind of information will be available with the node. Okay, and if graph is derived by using these 1 to 4 attributes, like as number, node type representing primary subregion or kernel, and number of vertices of subregion represented by the node, or area of the subregion, and the main axis this one, then the final description is translation invariant. Means if this kind of information is there in the graph along with the node, then that information will help us to achieve the translation invariance. Okay, and if it is derived from the 1 to 3, like as the node type representing primary subregions or kernels, or number of vertices of subregions represented by the node, or area of the subregion represented by the node, then it is translation and rotation invariant. Okay, then graph will be translation and rotation invariant. See that there are 3 things. One is translation invariant, another one is rotation invariant, and then fourth one is the scale invariant. So even if the shape or basically scale is changed, your graph should not change. So derivation using the first 2 attributes results in decomposition, which is size invariant, in addition to possessing the translation and rotation invariance. So we can also achieve the scale invariance, then translation invariance and rotation invariance. So if it is okay, if this kind of information is there, it is translation rotation invariant. If this kind of information is there, it will be translation invariant, and so on. So you can obtain the graph which are translation, rotation, and scale invariant by having this kind of information along with the node, right? Now, the region neighborhood graph. So another method for obtaining the graph is region neighborhood. See that we have seen, we are studying 3 types of graph representation. First one is that obtaining the graph from the skeleton. Second one is obtaining the graph from region decomposition. And third one is obtaining the graph from region neighborhood method. Now, region neighborhood method is very, very simple method for obtaining the graph. So what is there? The region or image can be represented by region neighborhood graph. That is also called as the region adjacency graph. So in that, the 2 regions are said to be adjacent. When we can say that 2 regions are said to be adjacent, there will be some, common pixels, boundary pixels will be common between 2 regions, then that is said to be adjacent. So the 2 regions are said to be adjacent if at least one boundary, suppose for example, this is one region and this is another region. So this boundary will be common for this region as well as this region. So the 2 regions are said to be adjacent if at least one boundary of point of the region is adjacent to some boundary points of the region. So this will be this is one object, this is another object. So this boundary point will be common for this object as well as this object, whereas these boundary points are not common, or these boundary points are not common. So these are if objects are like this. 2 objects are like this, having some adjacency. So these are called as the adjacent regions, and so on. So this graph represents every region as a node. So see that every region will be considered as one node. So for example, this is the object, or this is one region, this is another region. So this will be considered as a one node, and this will be considered as another node. Now see that what will be the relation between this node and this node. So this node is to the right of this node, or this node is to the left of this node. So this information will be there along with the edge between these two nodes. So nodes of the neighbor regions are connected by edges. Like for example, this is one region which is forming one node, this is another region which is forming another node, and then these two nodes will be connected by the graph, okay, or edge. So nodes of the neighboring regions are connected by the edges, and then this edge will represent the information that, okay, what is the relation between this node and this node. So this node is basically to the right of this node, or this node is to the left of this node. So a region neighborhood graph can be constructed from the chord tree representation from the run length encoded image data. And see that, for example, this is B region and this is A region. So we will have one node for this, and we will have another node for this. Or this is one region and this is another region. So this will represent one node and this will represent another node, and so on. Or this will be, okay, this is one region and this is another region, right? So very often the relative position of two regions can be used in description process. Like for example, a region A may be positioned to the left of region B. Like see that region A, this region A is to the left of region B. So this is to the left side. So region A is to the left side of B. Or this region A is above the region B, or close to the region B. Or there may be another region C may lie between the region A and B. So like that way we can have the relation between two regions, and this relation is, okay, represented along with the edge between this region and this region. So we know that the meaning of all the given relations, if A, B, C are the points, but with the exception of the relation to be close, they can become ambiguous if A, B, C are the regions. Now see that this will be very clear from the next graph. Like for example, this is a simple house, okay. So this is one region which I have named it as A. This is a roof of that one, okay, which I have represented it as a B, and this is basically the front wall of the house, which I have represented it as a D region, and this is a side wall of that house, which is represented as a C, right? Now, as I said that region, with the help of region adjacency graph, we can form the graph, and then it is very straightforward that every region will represent as a node. So this A region is represented as a node A, this B region is represented as a node B, this D region is represented as node D, and this C region is represented as node C. Now we have to just mention what is the relation between A node and a B node in the edge. See that this is connected. So A is left of B. So A node is to the left of B. So this relation is mentioned, right? Then this B is at the top of D. So B region is at the top of D, right? So that's why this area, this arrow is given. Then C region is to the left of D. So left of D, C region is left of D. Similarly, A region is top of C, right? So this information is there, okay, when you are constructing the region adjacency graph. It is very simple method. And then so how many nodes are there? Number of nodes will be equal to number of regions. So there are 4 regions: A region, B region, C region, and D region. A, B, C, and D. And then we have just formed what is the relation between A and B, what is the relation between B and D, what is the relation between C and D, what is the relation between A and C. Now we have obtained this graph. Now whether this graph is rotation invariant? Yes, absolutely it is a rotation invariant, translation invariant, and scale invariant. So the structural information which is represented with the help of region adjacency graph is translation, rotation, and scale invariant, right? So this will be more effective for representation of the objects or shape and so on. So in this lecture, we have studied three methods for representation of the graph. Okay, one is directly from the skeleton, second one is obtaining the graph by region decomposition, and third one is representing the graph by using region adjacency method and so on. So these are the three methods which are used, well known for graph representation and so on. So overall, in this chapter, what we have studied basically color feature, texture feature extraction, and then shape color feature extraction, and after that shape representation and description. So in that we have basically studied various kind of methods for shape representation. So region description generates a numeric value. See that earlier we have studied the statistical features like numerical features which are obtained from the either boundary or from the region. So many practical shape description method exist, but there is no generally accepted methodology of shape description. It is not known what is important in shape. So shape may change substantially and discontinuously with the image resolution. And then for that, a scale space approach aims to obtain the continuous shape description for continuous resolution changes. Okay. Then, in shape representation, we have studied first method, that is a region identification. So region identification, we have studied how to assign the labels to the different region as A region, B region, and so on. And then after that, we studied the contour-based shape description. So in that we studied first chain code method, and then after that we studied the simple geometric border representation method, which are based on the geometric properties like as a boundary length, curvature, bending energy, signature, and chord distribution. Also from the boundary we can obtain the Fourier shape descriptors. Okay, and so these methods are we have studied based on this boundary. And then third method, so all those features are basically numerical features, right? Shape numerical features. Here also another method for obtaining the shape feature is based on the region method, region based shape methods. So in that, simple geometric region descriptors use geometric properties of the described region like as the area, Euler number, projections, height, width, eccentricity, elongatedness, rectangularity, direction, and compactness. So all those features are numerical features, and further statistical approach for recognition is used, okay, for recognizing the object in the computer vision and so on. And then also we have studied statistical moments like as this one, zeroth moment, first moment, and second moment, and so on. So like that way we have studied, we have taken a numerical problem on that one. And after that, okay, we studied how to obtain the graph from the subregions by using first we have studied how to obtain the skeleton by region thinning and so on, and then graph, how to obtain the graph from that one. So in that graph based method we have studied three methods: obtaining the graph from the skeleton, obtaining the graph from region decomposition, and then obtaining the graph from the region adjacency method. So these things we have studied in our chapter number 3, right? So these are the region neighborhood graph, or region decomposition, or region thinning, or skeleton. So these are the three methods which we have studied in our third chapter. So this is all from the third chapter, and in tomorrow's lecture we will start chapter number 4, and we will quickly finish that chapter because most of the part we have studied in machine learning. Only see that in statistical approach for recognition we have studied in this one machine learning part in the first semester. So I'll quickly take that one, maybe one hour or like that. But the part which we have not studied is the syntactic recognition approach. So syntactic recognition approach is basically used in graph based matching and so on. So that we'll study in detail in our chapter number 4 and so on. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much.